Hello, my name is Mohammed Sangare, and today I'm going to be doing a text analysis of a short story and a poem. I'll be looking at how both texts talk about racism, oppression, and a fight for freedom. Here's my table of contents. First, I'll start with a short story, Analysis of Desiree's Baby by Kate Chopin. Then I'll move into a poem analysis of Sympathy by Paul Laurence Dunbar. After that, I'll compare and contrast the two texts, and finally, I'll connect them to the status quo. So, I'll start with the short story. Desiree's Baby is about a woman named Desiree who was adopted as a child, so nobody actually knows what her full background is. She grows up, marries Armand, a wealthy plantation owner, and they have a baby together. I think at first everything seems to be perfect, but over time, people notice how the baby doesn't look fully white. Instead of questioning himself or the system he lives in, Armand decides that Desiree must be the problem. He pulls away from her and basically acts like she and the baby are a disgrace. The main conflicts is between Desiree's need for love and acceptance, and Armand's racism and obsession with his reputation. In the end, Desiree disappears with the baby, and only later Armand finds out that he is actually the one with black ancestry. So the person judging her is the one carrying the thing he's so afraid of. On this slide, I focus on what the story is saying and how Chopin builds that message. The theme is that racism and power can completely destroy relationships and a person's identity. Desiree loses her home, her family, and even her sense of who she is because the society around her is built on slavery and strict ideas about race. Chopin uses a lot of devices to show this. The stone pillar where Desiree was found and the plantation at Labrie acts like symbols. They show how unstable her place in this world is and how much control Armand has over her life. The setting of the dark plantation really creates a feeling of control and hidden violence. There are also hints early on about Armand's harsh personality and the way people react to the baby. The foreshadowing gets us ready for the ending. And then there's the irony. Armand spends the whole story acting superior, and then the letter reveals that he's the one with black ancestry. The tone of the story starts off almost romantic, but slowly becomes tense and tragic as racism takes over. My personal reaction to this story was pretty strong. I felt really bad for Desiree and the baby because they were punished for something they couldn't control. The way Armand changes so quickly from loving to cruel shows how fragile love is when it's based on power and status instead of respect. The twist at the end, where we learn Armand's background, really stood out to me. It made me think about how people project their own fear and shame onto others. For me, the story doesn't just stay in the past. Colorism and racism still affects families to this day. People still worry about how dark someone's skin is and how some families still care more about image than about supporting each other. So even though this story is old, it connects a lot to our modern world. Now I'll move on to the poem Sympathy by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Instead of a full storyline, this poem focuses on one powerful image, a caged bird. The speaker keeps repeating, I know what the caged bird feels, and describes the world outside as bright and beautiful. There's sun, grass, and a river, but the bird can't reach any of it. The lines are short and medium in length, and there is a clear rhythm and rhyme, so it almost sounds like a song, Each of the three stanzas starts with I know, which makes it feel really personal, like the speaker has lived this experience. The main action is simple. The bird beats its wings, hurts itself on the bars, and still sings. The bird is a symbol for people trapped by oppression, especially black people in Dunbar's time. The main ideas in sympathy are the struggle of living under racism and the deep desire to be free and treated with dignity. Dunbar uses strong imagery so we can actually picture the cage, the blood, and the scars. That makes the suffering feel real. The tone is sad and frustrated, and you can feel how badly the bird wants freedom. The caged bird itself is a symbol for people who are controlled by unfair systems. The diction is simple but powerful. Words like beat and scar are easy to understand, but they hit hard emotionally. The regular rhyme and rhythm make the birds cry for freedom sound like a song, which is interesting because the content is really painful. He also plays with contrast. The bright spring world outside the cage versus the dark, tight space inside. And the bird's song works as a metaphor for voices and protests of oppressed people. My reaction to this poem was also emotional but in a different way than the story. The image of the bird hurting itself just to try to get free really stayed with me. It helped me imagine what it feels like when your body is able to move, but your situation or society keeps blocking you. I was also surprised by how sad the song is. At first, you might think a bird singing is something peaceful, but here the song is actually a cry of pain. That made me think about how people's protests or anger are sometimes judged without really listening to where they come from. Overall, it reminded me that when people speak out about racism or injustice, it usually comes from years of being trapped or ignored, not just one small event. On this slide, I compare the two texts. There are some clear similarities. Both Desiree's Baby and Sympathy talk about racism and oppression. Both focus on characters who feel trapped. Desiree is trapped by her social position and her husband's power, and the bird is literally trapped in a cage. Both texts also use symbolism to show suffering instead of spelling everything out directly, and both criticize an unfair society, but they are also different. Desiree's Baby shows racism in a family and on a plantation, so it looks more at relationships and social status. Sympathy shows racism through one strong image, the caged bird, and focuses more on feelings than on events. The story works as a narrative with a clear beginning, middle, and twist at the end, while the poem repeats the same emotion in different ways across the three stanzas. So together, they give us two angles. One is a full story about tragic families, and the other is a concerned emotional picture of what it feels like to live in a cage. Finally, I want to connect these texts to the status quo or the way things are today. Even though both pieces were written a long time ago, the issues they show are still real. Racism affects people's lives. Darker skin is still judged more harshly in many places, and some voices are still pushed aside or ignored. We can think of the cage and sympathy as different systems today, like policing, education, or even social media that can limit opportunities or silence certain groups. And in Desiree's Baby, the way Armand controls Desiree's life and decides her fate reminds me of how power and privilege still decides whose stories get believed. So both texts challenge us to notice these patterns and think about what needs to change so that people can actually live freely and be treated freely. Thank you. Here's my works cited.